Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is an expectation of clean, absolute precision.
Right, yeah.
It feels almost like engineering. I mean, if you fall and break your arm, you go to the hospital, they take an x-ray, and that glowing screen shows a very jagged, unmistakable white line.
Yeah, you can't miss it.
You really can't. The doctor points at it and says, well, there is the fracture. And it is comforting in a strange way.
It is.
We like our problems to be visible, categorized, and easily labeled. We want the physical data right in front of our eyes,
Absolutely.
But when you step into the world of ancient language, specifically into the text of the ancient Hebrew scriptures, that pristine medical x-ray machine just, it stops working.
It really does. It breaks down entirely.
We are looking at a diagnostic landscape concerning the human condition that is entirely different. It requires us to look past all our modern assumptions.
Oh, completely.
Welcome to Reform Thinking. Today, we are taking a deep dive into an absolutely staggering linguistic investigation.
Yeah, it is a huge topic.
It really is. We are looking at the specific Hebrew words used for humanity in these ancient texts. We are zeroing in on two distinct terms for you today.
Two very specific words.
Right. First, the word ʻēnôsh, and second, the word ʻādām. The goal of this deep dive is to understand how ancient language defines what it actually means to be a human being.
Which is such a massive question.
It is. We are moving far past basic biology here. This is about our status as created beings, our inherent frailty, and our absolute total dependence on the creator who put breath in our lungs.
Looking at the original language completely shatters the modern framework we use to view ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in an era that aggressively celebrates autonomy.
Oh, yeah. Everywhere you look.
The air we breathe is just filled with the idea of self-determination. It is the belief that we are the undisputed masters of our own fate, that we are capable of engineering our way out of any problem. But the ancient text provides a totally different perspective on reality.
It sets up a totally different baseline.
It does. It sets up a core contrast that defines everything. You have human finitude placed sharply against divine sovereignty.
Yeah.
The distinction between the eternal, limitless creator and the finite, fragile creature is absolute. There's no middle ground at all.
None.
There's no overlapping territory where humans get to play God.
What blows my mind about this diagnostic x-ray of humanity is that the ancient Hebrews actually used completely different words depending on what aspect of the human condition they were looking at.
It is a brilliant feature of the language.
It is. But before we get to the heavy theology, we should look at where these words even came from. Let us look at the etymology of ʻēnôsh across the broader Semitic languages.
Right, because this is not just an isolated Hebrew idea locked away in a vacuum.
No, not at all. We see the root of this word scattered all over the ancient Near East. You find it in Ugaritic as the word ansh.
Yeah, ansh?
You see it in Akkadian as amilu or teneshetu. It shows up in Arabic as insan and in Aramaic as anash.
That cross-cultural presence tells us something vital. It shows that the root concept behind ʻēnôsh was embedded in the consciousness of the entire region.
It was everywhere.
Ugaritic was the language of a prominent Canaanite city-state. Akkadian functioned as the massive, sweeping diplomatic language of the Mesopotamian empires.
Like the English of its day.
Right. It was used for all the trade and treaties. All of these different cultures, with all their different pantheons and political structures, utilized variations of this specific word to describe the human being.
Wow.
But when you open the biblical text, something highly specific happens with the statistical distribution of the word. ʻēnôsh occurs only 42 times in the entire Old Testament.
Wait, only 42 times?
That is it. And almost all of those occurrences are tightly clustered in poetic texts. You find it 18 times in the book of Job.
Okay.
You find it 13 times in the Psalms and 8 times in the prophecies of Isaiah.
Okay, let us unpack this. 42 times for ʻēnôsh, almost entirely locked into the poetry sections. Compare that to the other word, Adam.
The contrast is huge.
That word occurs 554 times. It is heavily concentrated in prose, historical records, and prophetic declarations.
Over 500 times.
Right. You find it an unbelievable 132 times in the book of Ezekiel alone.
That is a staggering amount.
It is. It shows up 49 times in Ecclesiastes and 46 times just in the first 11 chapters of Genesis.
Yeah.
It is like the difference between a clinical researcher calling you a homo sapien in a sprawling scientific journal versus a poet calling you a fragile mortal in a devastating sonnet about grief.
That is a great way to put it.
The scientific journal categorizes your species, you know. The sonnet captures your existential vulnerability. So why does Enosh almost entirely drop out of historical prose and live only in the poetry of suffering and worship?
Well, historical prose is designed to record events, lay out genealogies, and track massive national movements. It deals with the collective actions of humanity on the stage of history.
Which makes sense.
Right, which is why ādām is the appropriate term there. It acts as a collective category for the species as a whole, especially humanity, before any division into nations or distinct historical groups.
It is the baseline designation.
Yes, the baseline for the created human being.
Yeah.
But poetry, particularly the agonizing lament psalms and the massive philosophical speeches in the book of Job that deals with the internal devastating reality of individual existence before a holy God.
Oh, wow.
When Job sits on the ash heap, scraping his diseased skin with a piece of broken pottery, reeling from the sudden death of all his children, the text does not use the generic biological category.
Right, it wouldn't fit.
It uses enosh. It reaches for the specific word that signifies a creature made of dust, destined to return to the dust, grappling with pain it cannot comprehend.
Man.
The poetic genre creates a space for emotional weight that straightforward prose simply does not accommodate.
Let us sit with the sheer volume of Ezekiel's use of the phrase son of man, which in Hebrew is ādām. As we noted, he uses it over 90 times.
Over 90 times. It is incredible.
When you read the opening chapters of Ezekiel, you are reading some of the most overwhelming, terrifying visions of the glory of God anywhere in ancient literature.
Absolutely terrifying.
Ezekiel is a priest in exile, sitting by the Shabar Canal in Babylon, and the heavens just open up. He sees a massive storm wind, flashing fire, and 4 terrifying living creatures.
The imagery is wild.
He sees wheels within wheels full of eyes, gleaming like beryl. Above the expanse, he sees the likeness of a throne made of sapphire and a figure glowing like hot metal surrounded by brilliant light.
Yeah.
Ezekiel falls on his face in absolute terror, and in the midst of that overwhelming, blinding divine sovereignty, God speaks. And he addresses Ezekiel as ʻādām.
Son of man.
Right, son of man, stand on your feet. It feels like a constant, aggressive reinforcement of Ezekiel's baseline creature status.
In that context, the phrase ʻādām highlights the vast, unbridgeable chasm between the prophet and the divine glory he is witnessing.
The gap is just infinite.
It is. Ezekiel is looking at the throne room of the sovereign God. The text is constantly forcing the reader to recognize that Ezekiel is just a member of the created species.
Yeah.
He is a frail offshoot of the dirt, allowed to see these things solely by the sheer grace of the Creator. He is a son of Ādām.
Wow.
Now, contrast that staggering visionary experience with the book of Job. Job is not receiving visions of a sapphire throne or wheels of fire.
Not at all.
He is experiencing the crushing, suffocating weight of loss, disease, and the agonizing apparent silence of God. Job's laments use ʻēnôsh to express the absolute, total inability of the mortal creature to justify himself or demand an audience with the Almighty.
The literary genre dictates the word choice.
Yes, and the word choice drives the theology.
I am tracking with this. To truly grasp the desperate frailty loaded into the word ʻēnôsh, we first have to establish the baseline of what it means to simply be a created human.
Which is crucial.
That baseline is captured by the word ādām. When you look at the opening chapters of Genesis, there are 4 primary assertions made about Ādām in the creation narratives.
Right.
First, human existence comes entirely from God. Second, humans are inherently communal beings.
The text states unequivocally that it is not good for the man to be alone.
Exactly. Third, the provision of nourishment is tied directly to the act of creation. And fourth, humanity has a cultural mandate, meaning dominion over the animals and the specific task of tilling and keeping the soil.
Those 4 points construct the absolute foundation of the biblical definition of humanity. Notice how entirely devoid of autonomy this picture is.
We have no autonomy here.
First, our existence is a derived existence. We are not self-existent. We did not will ourselves into being.
Right.
The creation of humanity in these early texts is a sweeping statement about primeval history. It asserts that every single human who has ever drawn a breath owes their existence entirely to the Creator.
We are entirely contingent beings.
Yes, our very pulse relies on the will of God sustaining it. Second, our communal nature proves we are not designed for isolation.
Yeah.
We're designed to reflect the relational nature of our Maker within a community of other created, dependent beings.
The third point, the provision of nourishment, is so easily overlooked, but it reinforces that contingency perfectly.
Oh, absolutely.
God provides the vegetation in Genesis 1, and he plants the garden in Genesis 2. The creature cannot sustain itself at all.
Not even a little bit.
Think about how fragile that makes us. We have to consume physical resources provided by the Creator just to delay starvation for another day.
It is humbling.
You can be the most powerful monarch on earth, and if you do not eat a piece of bread, you will die. It is a built-in, inescapable mechanism of dependence. God makes the menu.
We also have to account for the later expansions in the Genesis text, specifically the blessing of fertility and the monumental concept of being made in God's image.
Which is the Hebrew word selim.
Right. Being made in the image of God has generated libraries full of theological debate, but the textual evidence strongly suggests it is an explicative concept regarding relationship.
Okay, unpack that.
God made humans to be relational partners within the created order. We are beings who possess the capacity to hear the Creator speak and the ability to respond to Him.
It establishes a capacity for communion.
Yes, it most certainly does not imply that humans carry a spark of divinity, or that we are independent minor deities roaming the earth.
Which is a popular misconception today.
It is. The image of God is a reflection of the Creator, a status granted entirely by grace, enabling the finite, frail creature to communicate with the infinite, limitless Maker.
Wait, I am getting stuck here because the contrast with other ancient cultures is just too sharp to ignore.
Oh, it is a glaring difference.
When you read ancient Babylonian myths like the Enuma Elish, you find a horrifying origin story for humanity. In those myths, the sea goddess Tiamat is slaughtered by the storm god Marduk, and the universe is built out of her corpse.
It is a very violent, chaotic cosmology.
Super violent. Then humans are created from the blood of a rebellious slain god named Kingu, and their sole purpose in existing was to do the brutal slave labor for the divine pantheon.
Right, the gods were tired.
Yeah, they were tired of digging canals and doing all the agricultural grunt work, so they made humans out of demon blood to do the heavy lifting.
It is wild.
But the Hebrew text says humans were created by a sovereign, distinct God, not from the blood of a defeated deity, but from the ordinary dust of the ground. And they were given the dignity to rule the earth and cultivate it on his behalf.
Yeah.
That is a massive theological flex by the Hebrews. It is almost like anti-Babylonian propaganda. Is that how they meant it?
It was a total earth-shattering paradigm shift for the whole region. In the Mesopotamian view, humans were an afterthought, a functional, disposable utility designed to alleviate the burdens of the pantheon.
Just a tool.
Exactly.
Huh.
The gods themselves were dependent in that system. They needed the sacrifices and the agricultural labor of the humans just to eat and maintain their strength.
So it was a codependent relationship.
It was a pathetic, codependent system where the divine realm relied on the mortal realm. The Genesis narrative obliterates that concept entirely.
Yeah, God doesn't need us to feed him.
The Creator is sovereign. He lacks nothing. He does not need human labor to survive. He does not eat the sacrifices.
Wow.
He gives the cultural mandate to humanity as a lavish gift, a dignified vocation. Humans are placed in the garden to work it and keep it as stewards under the ultimate sweeping authority of God.
So the labor is not a punishment in itself.
Right. The labor is not slave work for a lazy pantheon. It is the purposeful, meaningful activity of a creature reflecting the creative nature of its maker.
We should also clarify the grammatical distinction in the text between humanity as a whole, designated by the word Adam, and the specific individual man who later becomes Adam, the proper noun.
Yes, reading through the genealogies, you see a shift.
Right.
In the opening chapter of Genesis and the beginning of chapter 2, Adam is preceded by the definite article in the Hebrew phrasing, Adam. It translates directly to the man or the human.
Okay.
It is referring to the species, the representative head of humanity. It is only later in the narrative text, as the genealogies begin to emerge in chapters 4 and 5, that the definite article drops away.
And that is when Adam becomes a proper name.
Yes, Adam begins to function as a specific proper name for a historical individual. This reinforces the idea that the creation narrative is making massive, universal statements about every single human being on the planet.
Every person is Adam.
Every person is created inherently communal, entirely dependent on God for nourishment, and tasked with a purpose within the physical world.
Because humans are created beings, a hard, unyielding boundary exists between them and the Creator. This brings us to the core theological contrast that runs through all of the source texts we are looking at.
It is the dividing line of reality.
I was reading through Isaiah chapter 31 the other day in preparation for this deep dive, and verse 3 hit me like a ton of bricks. It says, Egypt is man and not God. The Hebrew word used there is Adam. Egypt is Adam. We also see wisdom sayings quoted in prophecy, like in Isaiah chapter 2, where the text repeats the refrain, so man is humbled and men are brought low.
Right.
And Numbers chapter 23, verse 19 plainly states, God is not man that he should lie.
What stands out so sharply in these verses is that the biblical text does not traffic in abstract, philosophical statements about God's ontology.
Right, it is not trying to be a Greek textbook.
Exactly. It does not hand the reader Greek philosophical categories about the nature of being or the substance of the divine. Instead, it makes gritty, practical, phenomenal contrasts.
Yeah.
The distinction is always about limits. God is limitless, holy, perfectly righteous, and completely sovereign over the arc of history.
While humanity is the opposite.
Humanity, Ādām, is hopelessly limited, prone to failure, susceptible to corruption, and entirely subject to the unfolding of history.
Wow.
When Isaiah says Egypt is man and not God, he is aggressively confronting the political maneuvering of the Israelites. They were terrified of the Assyrian Empire.
So they looked for help.
Right, they sought a military alliance with Egypt, relying on Egyptian chariots and horses for salvation.
If humans are finite and God is infinite, trusting human authority is not just a bad political strategy. It is a fundamental failure to recognize reality.
It is a delusion.
The text aggressively warns against trusting in human beings for salvation or security. Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 5 says, "Cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his strength."
Yeah.
Later on in the Psalms, chapter 146, verse 3 warns, "Put not your trust in princes, in a son of man, in whom there is no salvation."
Son of man again.
Right. Trusting an alliance with Egypt, trusting a charismatic political leader, trusting your own massive bank account. It is treating the frail creature as if it were the sovereign creator.
That failure to recognize reality reaches its absolute ridiculous peak in the concept of idolatry.
Oh man, the prophets go so hard on this.
The prophetic texts mock the manufacture of idols with biting, relentless sarcasm. Passages in 2 Kings and the Psalms describe idols as the literal work of human hands.
Blocks of wood.
Right, blocks of wood and slabs of stone that have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but cannot see. The prophet Isaiah writes a devastating critique of this behavior.
In chapter 44, right?
Yeah. He describes a man going into the forest, cutting down a cedar tree. He uses half the wood to build a fire, warm his body, and bake his bread so he doesn't starve.
Because he needs nourishment to live.
Exactly. Then he takes the other half of the exact same log, carves it into a figure, bows down to it, and says, "Deliver me, for you are my God."
It is absolute madness. The finite Adam whose breath is in his nostrils, who needs to eat baked bread just to keep his body from shutting down, thinks he can manufacture a deity out of firewood.
It is completely absurd.
It is the ultimate inversion of the creation order. Instead of the sovereign creator making the creature from the dust, the frail creature tries to make a creator out of a tree.
Yeah.
The text mocks this because it exposes the total inability of mankind to save itself. It highlights the absolute supremacy of God over the futile, absurd efforts of humanity to manufacture their own salvation.
When humans violate that primal boundary, when they attempt to seize the autonomy and authority that belongs only to God, we move from the generic biological category of Ādām into the fragile, guilty, desperate reality of ģēnôš.
This is where the shift happens.
This devastating transition is anchored in the narrative of Genesis chapter 3. The text details how the transgression of the divine commandment and the resulting punishment permanently, irrevocably define the human condition.
Right.
The attempt by the creature to be like God, grasping at the knowledge of good and evil, results in an immediate, crushing awareness of nakedness, vulnerability, and massive alienation from the Creator.
We see the fallout of this fragility play out in the key ģēnôš texts. There is a beautiful, haunting line in the 103rd Psalm that says, "As for man, his days are like grass. He flourishes like a flower of the field, for the wind passes over it, and it is gone."
That imagery is so vivid.
Psalm 8 asks, "What is man that you are mindful of him?" And in the middle of Job's speeches, chapter 4 poses the devastating question.
What does it ask?
It says, "Can mortal man be in the right before God? Can a man be pure before his maker?"
Our textual data provides a massive paradigm shift here regarding how we read Genesis 3.
Okay, tell me more about that.
The actual word fall does not appear anywhere in the Genesis text.
Wait, really? It isn't in there?
Not at all. That term comes much later in history, stemming from early Jewish literature like 4th Ezra. Genesis 3 presents a primal event where guilt, alienation, and physical punishment become permanent characteristics of human existence.
So it is not just a historical marker.
No, it is not just a historical transition from a golden age. It establishes the baseline defining reality of the entire human race. We are born into this condition.
We inherit the guilt.
Furthermore, passages in Job make it explicitly, undeniably clear that Enosh cannot be clean or righteous before God. Total inability to stand justified before the Creator is the defining mark of the mortal creature.
I am struck by the idea that human limitation is not an accident of biology, it is a judgment.
Yes.
The physical frailty, the sickness, the deep emotional exhaustion that plagues us, these are the direct lingering results of the primal event.
They are the consequences of rebellion.
But despite this massive alienation and total inherited guilt, God still affirms humanity. He does not just wipe them off the map.
Which he had every right to do.
He allows them to live. He makes garments of skin to cover their shame, replacing their pathetic fig leaves. He provides for them even as he banishes them from the garden into the harsh wilderness.
Yeah.
The tension between divine punishment for the creature's rebellion and divine preservation through the Creator's sheer grace is just palpable.
That tension is the heartbeat of the entire biblical narrative. God is absolutely holy. He cannot tolerate the rebellion of the creature.
Right.
The judgment of death is pronounced with absolute certainty. Dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Yet, his sovereign will is to preserve a remnant.
He continues the line.
He continues the line of humanity, to execute a plan of redemption on his own timeline. He sustains the very creatures who threw their rebellion right in his face. This brings us back to the book of Job, and its heavy, saturated use of the word Enosh. Job's speeches are a masterclass in understanding this excruciating tension between experiencing divine judgment and recognizing divine sovereignty.
Let us dig into Job's lament of transience in chapter 14.
Okay.
Job says, "Man who is born of a woman is few of days and full of trouble. He comes out like a flower and withers. He flees like a shadow and continues not."
He is so bleak.
Job is taking his intense, agonizing personal suffering, the physical boils covering his skin, the violent loss of his children, the betrayal of his friends who sit and stare at him, and he links his specific pain to the universal frailty of the whole human race.
Yeah, he zooms out.
He uses Enosh to say, this is not just my isolated pain, this is the inescapable reality of being immortal.
Job recognizes that his suffering, while uniquely intense, is symptomatic of the broader, broken human condition.
Right.
He asks in verse 4 of that same chapter, "Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? There is not one." He acknowledges the inherent, inescapable guilt and the impossibility of self-justification.
He knows he can't fix himself.
Job understands that his days are determined, that the sovereign God has appointed his limits which he cannot pass. The use of Enosh in these chapters strips away any lingering illusion of human grandiosity.
Wow.
The individual sufferer becomes the microphone for the entire human race, declaring our collective inability to conquer death or demand answers from the Almighty. The creature cannot put the Creator on trial.
This inherent frailty is so severe, so universally binding, that the text frequently links human destiny with the destiny of animals.
That is a hard pill to swallow.
There is a specific recurring phrase used in the Hebrew text, ʻādām ad behema, which translates directly to from man to beast, or the people as well as the cattle.
Yeah.
We see this phrase repeatedly during the flood narrative in Genesis. God says, he will blot out man and beast from the face of the earth.
Right, together.
We see it in the book of Exodus during the plagues of Egypt, where devastating judgment falls indiscriminately on both people and livestock. And we see it in the prophecies of Jeremiah concerning the impending violent destruction of Babylon.
The linguistic link between humans and animals in the context of divine judgment is an absolute shattering of human pride.
It really is.
When the judgment of the Creator falls, all the biological similarities between humans and animals become glaringly, uncomfortably obvious.
We aren't that different on a physical level.
Both require oxygen to breathe. Both require physical food to survive. Both bleed when struck. Both drown when the waters rise.
Yeah.
The phrase ʻādām ad behema emphasizes that in the face of the Creator's wrath, the structural hierarchy of creation collapses.
Wow, that is a heavy thought.
The human being, despite having the cultural mandate and the unique capacity for relationship with God, shares a baseline, inescapable physical vulnerability with the beasts of the field.
It is like realizing that during a massive Category 5 hurricane, the billionaire sitting in his reinforced coastal mansion and the stray cat hiding under a dumpster in the alley are both just trying not to drown.
That is exactly it.
When the storm surge hits and the water rises 12 feet in an hour, the bank account means absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
The stock options, the social status, the Ivy League degree, they mean nothing. The human and the animal share the exact same physical vulnerability to the elements. The forces of nature, which are governed entirely by the sovereign God, do not respect human status or wealth.
We see this theological concept taken to its absolute agonizing limit in the book of Ecclesiastes.
Oh, Ecclesiastes goes there.
The author, known as Kohelet, introduces a heavy, relentless dose of skepticism regarding human achievements. He spends his life accumulating wealth, building massive gardens, hiring choirs, pursuing every intellectual and physical pleasure.
He does it all.
And he reaches a sobering conclusion. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 19 says, "For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other.
Then,
They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beasts, for all is vanity." Kohelet radicalizes human transience. He describes the human condition as an existence until death.
existence until death, that is a bleak, chilling phrase to apply to your own life.
It really is.
Kohelet points out that death operates like an ambush. It catches humans completely off guard.
Yeah, you never see it coming.
You can spend your entire life accumulating wealth, building a massive business empire, studying philosophy, or trying to leave a legacy that will last for generations. And in a single, unpredictable moment, a sudden illness or a violent accident wipes it all out.
Gone.
In that specific moment of physical frailty, human beings are completely indistinguishable from animals. We return to the dust, just like they do.
Yet Ecclesiastes provides a specific, grounded solution to this seemingly bleak reality.
Right, it doesn't just leave us in despair.
The text does not advocate for nihilism, despair, or throwing your hands up in defeat. Instead, in the face of certain death and the total inability of humans to control their own destiny, Kohelet advises enjoying the present moment.
Yeah.
He writes about the simple acts of eating, drinking, and finding satisfaction in your daily labor. This is not a call to thoughtless hedonism.
No, not at all.
It is a deliberate affirmation of the Creator's gifts. By accepting our limits and enjoying the simple, basic provisions of life, we are acknowledging our utter dependence.
We're leaning into it.
We cannot fathom the whole work of God. As Ecclesiastes chapter 8 clearly states, we cannot comprehend His sovereign, sweeping timeline. Therefore, our proper, rational posture is one of humble acceptance of our limits.
We have spent a ton of time on the heavy theological weight of ʻēnôsh regarding mortality, divine judgment, and the inevitability of death.
It is a heavy topic.
It is. But the texts reveal fascinating exceptions where this word actually grounds us in ordinary everyday life, far away from the ash heap of Job.
Yeah, there are a few bright spots.
Let us look at Isaiah chapter 8, verse 1. The text uses the phrase ʻēnôsh. It translates to with common writing or an ordinary man's stylus.
Right.
Then we have Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 10, which uses the phrase ʻēnôsh shalomi. This translates to my trusted friends or men of my peace. And perhaps most surprising, ʻēnôsh is used as a proper name. Enosh, the grandson of Adam and the son of Seth, found in the genealogies of Genesis chapter 4.
These exceptions are incredibly instructive for understanding the evolution of the language.
How so?
Linguistic scholars suggest these specific uses likely point to an older stage of Hebrew, where ʻēnôsh had a broader, much more neutral meaning before it became strictly associated with poetic lament and suffering.
Ah, I see.
The phrase in Isaiah chapter 8, ʻēnôsh, is particularly illuminating. God commands the prophet Isaiah to write a prophecy on a large tablet using ordinary letters.
So everyday script.
The instruction means to write in a script that the common, illiterate person on the street could easily recognize, rather than the complex formal script used by highly educated royal scribes.
Wow.
It shows that being immortal, being ʻēnôsh, is entirely synonymous with being common, average, or unexceptional.
I absolutely love the imagery of Isaiah 8. It is fascinating that a word so steeped in the high poetry of death, human frailty, and terrifying divine judgment is also used to say, hey, write this down in plain everyday letters so the guy buying bread in the market can read it.
It brings it right down to earth.
It makes you think about how our current culture views being ordinary. We live in a society completely obsessed with making a massive impact, leaving a huge legacy, and constantly standing out from the crowd.
Everyone wants to be a hero.
We are told we have to be exceptional. But what if seeing ourselves as common or ordinary is actually a massive relief?
It takes the pressure off.
You do not have to carry the weight of the world. You are just an ordinary creature, holding an ordinary stylus, living an ordinary life under the sovereign care of God.
That realization strips away the exhausting, crushing burden of trying to construct our own significance.
Yeah.
When we accept our status as ʻēnôsh, as common mortals entirely dependent on grace, we stop trying to ascend to the throne of God. We stop trying to control outcomes that belong solely to Him.
We stay in our lane.
We see this concept beautifully illustrated in the genealogies. Think about the naming of Seth's son. Seth looks at his newborn child and names him Enosh.
He essentially names his son frail mortal.
Why would a parent do that? What does it say about the early generations of humanity after the violent expulsion from Eden?
It is a stunning, breathtaking admission of reality. Adam and Eve tried to be like God, grasping for autonomy, and it resulted in death, alienation, and the curse of the ground.
It was a disaster.
Seth, witnessing the brutal reality of life outside the garden, witnessing the horrifying reality of murder between his brothers Cain and Abel, witnessing the reality of hard labor and thorns, he holds his newborn son and acknowledges the absolute truth.
Yeah.
We are not gods. We are incredibly frail. We are dying. And right there in Genesis chapter 4, verse 26, the text says, "To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh." At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord.
The connection established in that single verse is the climax of this entire linguistic study.
It really brings it all together.
The explicit recognition of human frailty, the literal naming of the mortal creature as frail, is the immediate catalyst for worship.
Wow.
It is only when humanity recognizes its absolute inability to save itself, its total weakness and failure, that it turns outward and calls upon the sovereign God for salvation.
You have to know you are broken first.
The name Enosh stands as a permanent marker in the text. Acknowledging your utter weakness is the absolute prerequisite for relying on the Creator. You cannot call upon the name of the Lord in any genuine sense as long as you believe you are independent, self-sufficient, and capable of managing your own existence.
Bringing all these linguistic and theological threads together, we have covered a massive amount of terrain today.
We really have.
We started with the broad, generic category of Adam. The text teaches us that we are created beings. We did not make ourselves.
No, we didn't.
We are meant for community, we are permanently bound to the earth, and we have a mandate to cultivate it. But we are also entirely, inescapably dependent on God for our very breath, our daily nourishment, and our continued existence.
Then we confronted the devastating reality of Enosh. We saw that due to the primal event of rebellion, humanity is characterized by permanent guilt, alienation, and physical frailty.
Yeah.
We are finite, broken creatures who cannot stand righteous before a holy God on our own merits. Our days are like grass fading in the wind.
We share a physical, biological vulnerability with the animals.
And our existence is entirely subject to the sovereign timeline and judgment of the Creator. Both of these words, Adam and Enosh, completely strip away every illusion of human independence. They leave us bare, totally exposed, and completely reliant on the mercy of the Almighty.
Which leaves us with a lot to process for you listeners out there. We started this whole conversation by talking about the desire for a clean, precise medical x-ray to diagnose our problems.
Right, we want the easy answer.
We want a simple fix. But ancient wisdom diagnoses humanity primarily by its limits, its inescapable frailty, and its total dependence on the Creator.
Which brings up a final thought to consider for you today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If ancient language defines humanity precisely by its limits and its dependence on the Creator, how should that change the way you react tomorrow when you are faced with your own physical or emotional exhaustion?
That is a great question.
We treat exhaustion as a failure. But what if your weakness is not a bug in your programming? What if it is not a flaw you need to hack, medicate, or optimize away?
Wow.
What if your frailty is the very definition of your species? A deliberate design meant to shatter your pride and drive you outward to trust the one who made you. When your energy runs out, it is simply the dust remembering what it is.